Employees are watching and they see what the leaders, what kind of culture they're setting. Are they doing what they say they're going to do? Do they say one thing but act in a different way? And I think that's really important to help develop and create a culture of trust and credibility, where employees feel like you take their input and you're going to handle situations when they happen and you're going to be fair about it, but you're not afraid to make those difficult decisions to help the environment.
Well, Loren, we're here for another episode of Campus Confidential.
2024.
We're still going. I think is episode 3. So, I mean, we're making magic around here. This is how this works, right? But today's conversation was quite interesting.
Yes.
I think people don't like to talk about compensation, yet it's always on our mind. So I think having that be part of the conversation was fun. So why don't you tell our listeners who our experts are today with us?
Yeah, I was so glad we had these folks. First of all, they're notable. I mean, these are accomplished folks in the human resources, higher education world. And so it's really quite a gift that they were with us. Dr. Andy Brantley is president and CEO of CUPA-HR. He's been there a long time, since I think 2005, something like that, 20 plus years. And for those who don't know, CUPA-HR represents human resources in higher ed and has 35,000 institutional representatives from almost 2,000 institutions of all types. So really a broad-based association. And I think it's notable, too, that he's the co-chair of the Washington Higher Education Secretariat, which is basically the CEOs of higher education associations. So he's really plugged into other associations as well.
I will add that Andy and I were colleagues. Yeah. When I was I'll say colleagues, I guess that's the right term, when I was with NACIS. And he also enjoys long runs and exploring the food scene anywhere he goes. So,
Oh, that's good to know. So we could have asked him about restaurants.
Yeah.
That's
exactly.
good to know. Joining Andy was Jami Painter, who is the Senior Associate Vice President and Chief Human Resource Officer for the University of Illinois system, all of the campuses of the University of Illinois. And like Andy's been there a very long time, since 2001. She's the principal HR advisor to the university's board of trustees, the president, the vice presidents, the cabinet, and oversees HR for all of the campuses, and had served in HR in the private sector before coming to the University of Illinois. So she's chair, by the way, of the CUPA-HR board and co-president of Leadership Illinois, and so is leading in other ways also beyond the University of Illinois. So just really great folks to have with us today.
Agreed. And I believe she shared in our prep call that her son went to Illinois State University. Go Redbirds. So
yeah, you're making all kinds of connections here.
I am. Right?
Redbirds, food scene. Yeah.
I like all the things. So what was kind of your biggest takeaway, or what do you think was, I don't know, juicy part of the conversation?
Well, I hesitate to say this a little bit, but I've always had very good working relationships with HR folks when I was in administrative roles. But I sometimes perceived our HR policies to be, if not rigid, at least fairly non-flexible. And Jami made a big point today about it's possible to create common universal policies that encourage individual flexibility for the benefit of employees, and including the employees in determining what that flexibility looks like. I loved that. That's a really contemporary, responsive, leader-driven, HR response, I think. So that to me was fantastic.
And it puts the piece on, you have a choice as a leader of who you're working with on campus to bring back to your teams what's needed for your success.
Yeah.
Right. We talked a
totally.
lot. There was a thread through the whole conversation about choice, employer of choice, department of choice, employees have choice. And I think really one of the notes I wrote down was leadership continues to be a choice, and who you partner with on campus to help your team be the best team it can be, and the employees get what they need, is key.
And not exercising the choices that you can make as a leader has consequences, I think, and exercise them as consequences. But I have known, as I'm sure you have, lots of leaders who don't do what's necessary when confronted with things that need to be decided and done for the benefit of the organization. So, there's choices both ways and consequences with all of them too. So great,
That's right.
Great conversation today.
Yeah, well, let's listen in and be those leaders that make choices that have a positive impact. Well, here we are. We have some guests with us today, Loren. How are you doing, Loren?
I am doing great, fine, well. How are you?
Great. I'm not going to let you get away with great this time. Are you really great?
Yeah, I know you always ask, do you have another word better than great? But if that's what it is, so what can I offer? I don't know.
Okay, that's
Swell?
fine. Swell. Okay, we'll go with swell today. I am finally feeling like myself. I struggled with a cold, flu, all the things to start the year, end the year. And the last 5 days, I'm like, I finally feel Kelsey.
Yeah, I get it. You can probably hear it in my voice. I'm still trying to recover from a cold, so I'm a little nasally, but I'm excited to be here.
Okay, the future is bright. I promise it will go away. So we have some guests. Jamie is here with us. Hi, Jamie. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. Nice to see you.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And we have Andy. How are you doing today?
I am great. Hi, Kelsey and Loren. Great to be here with you today.
Yeah, awesome to have you all. So we're excited. As we said in the last episode, our goal for this season is to have multiple guests and perspective on each episode and have a conversation from a variety of viewpoints. So we're really excited to have Andy and Jamie with us today. As a reminder, right, we're doing a series. So they're the first guests to talk about topic specific. So bear with us as we kind of figure out the flow and what this all looks like. Our hope today, though, is to really cover with Jamie and Andy as experts in human resources. I think sometimes we hear the term human resources and we maybe all make assumptions of who they are and what that means. And really, we want to talk to them, one, about compensation and what is it and how big is it and why does it matter? And then the combination of valuing staff, because together is really where we might argue there's major impact. And it's more than just a salary conversation. So, Loren, when you think about the survey we've been talking about, the CUPA-HR survey, the survey we've done with CUPA-HR, NERSA, and SCUP, what really stands out to you in the findings on these topics?
A couple of things I want to note. I like to start with some good news, not because I'm Pollyannish about the challenges we face, but because it's good to know that there are some silver linings there too. I noticed in the work that you've done, Andy and Jamie, that in the neighborhood of, I think 58% generally are satisfied with their job. That's down from the last survey, but above 50%. And in the survey that you referenced that we did, Kelsey, 69% enjoy the work culture. So there's some elements of good in there that if we can tap into, I think that's positive. 55% in the CUPA-HR survey, I noticed, feel recognized for their contributions. Not as high as we'd like, but more than half. And in the SCUP, NERSA, CUPA-HR, Compass survey, Kelsey, 75% feel supported by the direct manager. So again, I felt like, okay, there's some similarities there. I think we can feel good and confident about those findings. I noticed finally in the survey and the work that you did, Andy and Jamie, that about 3/4 are satisfied with PTO insurance and benefits. And so some good things to build upon in higher education. So I would say, Kelsey, that I think we're going to get into some of the challenges, the headlines that I noticed around voluntary turnover being high and people looking for other jobs, career satisfaction being down. We found that in both surveys. And but I think there's some things to build on. And I'm really, really excited, to have two notable leaders who think about this kind of thing all the time nationally for higher education. So those are just some nuggets to start with. And maybe if I could ask, Andy, let me start with you. How would you, summarize the sentiment right now. What do you think employees are feeling in higher education? And then Jamie, will get your lens too as a person in the university system.
Thank you, Loren and Kelsey. And again, it's great to have the opportunity to be here with you today. Even though Kelsey made a little comment about how people perceive HR, I'm going to unpack that with her a little bit later, off camera and off microphone. But totally we'll dive into that a little more deeply later. But I think first and foremost, it's important to acknowledge that just as we are individuals, the four of us here today, there is no one sentiment that would describe employees in higher education overall. And we often try to put things in a bucket, like all employees feel this way, or these are the experiences, where we all know just from our own experiences that everything can be different for me as an individual based on my particular work circumstances, my particular life circumstances. And it's really important for us, as the message there, as managers and supervisors, is to really be in tune with meeting people where they are. So as I work with, the employees at CUPA-HR, or as Jamie works with the employees at the University of Illinois, how do we show up every single day for those, not just as a group, but as individuals? And so, we could talk about the sentiment of the workforce for the U.S. overall, our higher education, but it's really, really important at the end of the day to ensure that we really do have that meet people where they are mindset. So I could share more, but Loren, I think that's a great way to start.
Yeah, that's great. Jamie, anything to add?
Yeah, I guess I'll be optimistic here as well and say I do believe our employees still believe in the value higher education brings our society and the country. There's so much noise out there that paints higher ed in a bad light. And I think we need to keep telling our stories about all the phenomenal research and work our faculty and staff do that have such a positive impact on people's lives around the world. At the University of Illinois system, for example, we've often been criticized for that we are being too modest and not sharing our success stories with the world because there's so many. And I think this is starting to change. We're now actually doing tours across our state to engage conversations with high schools, legislators, business owners, and families who never thought it might be possible for their kids to get a higher education degree from one of our prestigious campuses. So we're showing it is possible and providing them the tools to make it happen. And we just need to keep sharing our stories and data on the impact that we have. And I think that then spills over to our employees and the pride that they feel in working in higher education when they see these are all the great things that we're doing. And I think that then gives them some, purpose. And they feel like that even though maybe they don't feel like they're giving such a big impact because they're not in the classroom or they're not doing the research, they still have a part in it, in something much bigger that will impact everyone long after we're all gone from our jobs here.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I love this road show or telling the story. It feels that higher education, I will make a very big generalization. It's like, hey, it speaks for ourselves. We do good work and we just want people to see it. But how do we actually move the needle and flip that script of like, let's tell our story. Let's put our brand out there. Let's say what we're doing. So I love that y'all are out there doing it throughout the state and probably beyond. And then Andy, I wanted to just pick your brain a little bit. One of the things we've talked about some on the podcast in the first season, and it's come up, is individual at scale. And that's what I hear you saying is like, it is an individual experience. And then my head goes to, okay, so how do we scale that? So how do you, how do you have that conversation with your members of it's very individualized and there's only so many people to do the work and support the staff, faculty?
Kelsey, to expand upon what I shared earlier, it really, for me, and Jamie and I talk about this with our colleagues all the time, is that it boils down to what it means to be an employer of choice, what it means to be a supervisor of choice, what it means to be a manager of choice. And as we know, and Jamie knows all too well from being in a very large environment, there are things in the culture that make that particular department or that particular area a place where employees thrive, where they feel engaged, they feel connected. But there are also these little microcultures elsewhere where the culture is toxic and employees do not feel values and do not feel supported. So at the end of the day, for all of us, as leaders of higher education, and think about this across the country, what does it mean for the University of Illinois to be an employer of choice? What does it mean for the University of Georgia to be an employer of choice? What does it mean for Davidson College, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And there are key elements of that might be, broadcast from the top, if you will. But what are the things that happen every single day in those departments that help employees feel valued and supported and very much connected, as Jami was saying, to the mission and the purpose of the institution overall?
Yeah, we've heard and maybe uttered this idea that people don't leave jobs; they leave supervisors. And
yes.
So what I'm wondering, and I know in my experience, my career, I walk on glass for people that I admire and respect and who treat me well. I mean, I run through walls for those kinds of folks. I wonder how often can a really fantastic supervisor overcome a really difficult institutional environment in your experience, or do you have theories about this, or vice versa, a really fantastic story and place of pride overcome toxic environments? I mean, do you have any experience with that, advice about that, and maybe for people who are facing that, what they might do when they have one or the other?
Well, I'll kind of piggyback on what Andy was saying in terms of the culture at the top. And I think that really does play a significant role in setting the stage and the expectations for what is expected in terms of behavior at work and what are we going to tolerate and not tolerate. And if you have leaders that are willing to tolerate bad behavior and do nothing about it, you're going to have employees leave. They're going to see that nothing's going to be done. And so why work so hard at their jobs when nothing's going to be done about, like you said, maybe some toxic employees or an environment? And I think, if you have the courage to actually address the situations when they happen and to make difficult decisions, and sometimes it's to help a person exit out of your organization to make it a better place, that you need to have the courage to do that because employees are watching. And they see what kind of culture they're setting. Are they doing what they say they're going to do? Do they say one thing but act in a different way? And I think that's really important to help develop and create a culture of trust and credibility, where employees feel like you take their input and you're going to handle situations when they happen and you're going to be fair about it. But you're not afraid to make those difficult decisions to help the environment.
Yeah,
right,
that's right. I have exclamation point behind that, Jami.
So to build upon what Jami was saying, it's such a great question that there's, as I think that the two of you alluded to when we started, there's so much, and Jami said this too, there's so much noise around higher education this day, so much negativity in the press and, in our legislatures, et cetera. And so often that overshadows everything else. And so think of the circumstance where you're on a campus where there might be some controversy or turmoil at the top. I always come back to, and I'm going to actually use this quote with some of our early career professionals in a meeting tomorrow, is wherever you go, there you are. Wherever you go, there you are. And it's kind of from a Confucius saying, from centuries ago, but it really does resonate with me, is that so often we get caught up in all these things swirling around us. And we use that as an excuse not to think about how we make an impact every single day. So we often get caught up in the large scale projects or the things, instead of sometimes thinking the incremental things that I can do every day can make a difference, can make an impact. And so that's always my guidance when I'm talking with colleagues across the country that are undergoing some significant challenges in their culture and their organizations, is that, how can you work through those if possible? Or as Jami just said, sometimes it requires an exit. But also, how can you work through those things every single day in the ways that you impact those that you are most closely aligned to within the organization, either your direct reports or those that are your colleagues across campus?
That's right. I think that kind of goes back to the comments around being the campus of choice, the employer of choice, the department of choice. As the employee, you have choice. How are you going to show up? How are you choosing to stay in that environment or not stay in that environment? I think choice comes in all sorts of directions and places, right? And being very clear that things are not always just done to you. You have a voice in those situations and choice.
And Kelsey, related to that, and that I am the person who is responsible for me.
That's right.
I am responsible for me, and I should not wait to be, as a colleague used to say, anointed or appointed. It's I'm responsible for me. No one is looking out for me more than me. And that's not a negative or a positive. It's just kind of the reality of the circumstances we find ourselves in. And so what are those things that we're going to be engaged in? What are those things that we're going to look at as next steps or not? And ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm responsible for me.
Well, and I would say too, Kelsey, what Jami reminds us of in her answer too is leaders have a choice about whether they're going to do something. There are consequences to choosing not to do those things, especially when they're really hard and everybody's watching, to use your
choice
absolutely,
to do or not do something, right?
And choices of consequences too. Mm-hmm, so the responsibility, if I have responsibility for a team, when I know there's toxicity, as Andy was getting at, or people are watching, as Jami was describing, my choices have consequences too, and I have to step up as a leader to do the hard things that everybody's asking to be done in order for the environment to thrive, the people to thrive, and the institution to succeed. So lots of choices.
I was just going to add, our college campuses are, while they are large, they are actually very small. And some colleges have great reputations for being a great place to work, and some don't. And it's a small world that everybody knows where are the good departments to work for. What are the ones you want to stay away from? And it doesn't take long to get around to which departments do you not want to go to. Yeah. And so I think, you're always going to have differences, right, in your departments and with large colleges at each university. But you want to be that college of choice or that employer of choice that we are the great place to work for. And if you don't have that consistently across your institution, then you need to start addressing those areas where you don't have that.
So it makes me wonder then, what are the characteristics or the predictors? Like, to me, this impacts recruitment and retention, but I want to think about the retention side. What are the predictors or characteristics that make it the employer or department of choice? Do we have stats on this? Do we have ideas on this? Andy, maybe let's start with you this time.
Yeah, so we actually asked a question related to this in the employee retention survey that you and Loren were referring to earlier. And by far, the most important predictor of retention was employee job satisfaction and well-being. Far beyond any of the, and other things were also important: fair pay, flexible work, parental benefits, safety. But by far, the strongest predictor that an employee would stay was related to that employee's job satisfaction, well-being. Conversely, the strongest predictors of turnover were the employee's perception of increased work demands, and overwork in general.
So when you say job satisfaction, do we have any idea like what goes into that? Because that feels like a big
what are the predictors
word
of that?
And maybe we don't know. Yeah. Maybe it's unfair.
Yeah, we do. So there are, and I'm going to go back to one of the things I said earlier is I don't want to say it depends because we all have different motivations, but there's some key things that related to that and it's things that we've already alluded to. So connection to the mission, connection to the purpose, feeling like their work has meaning, that they have some role in the overall work of the organization, that is in general a nice place to work, a nice environment, that they feel valued and that type of thing. So Jami, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, no, I think those are all great points. I think, we mentioned earlier, you mentioned compensation. And while everybody wants, more compensation, really the research has found that is not the number one motivator for somebody's happiness and satisfaction at work. It's really more the intrinsic rewards, like Andy mentioned. And I think what we have found since the pandemic is that employees more than ever are setting personal boundaries for themselves and really prioritizing what's important to them. And we have found that what's important is that their wellness, if they believe that the leaders actually care about their well-being, their work-life balance, offering those flexible work arrangements so that they can spend more time with family now more than ever. And so those are what we are saying that is helping us in terms of our retention and lowering our turnover is really prioritizing and spending some effort in what can we do to help that employee's overall well-being, their entire work and personal life, so that they have boundaries now and they can step away from work. They don't feel like they're having to check in every evening. And that's what they're expecting. And if they don't get it from us, they're going to leave and they're going to find it from someone else who will give that to them.
And Jamie, if I can build upon that, I was leading a session for a group of presidents back in December. And one of the things that I shared related to what you just said is that we have to get out of this mind frame of, in my day, this was the work expectation 30 years ago or 20 years ago. It doesn't matter what we might have, quote unquote, endured as part of the early part of our careers. That no longer matters. Not that it should have ever mattered, but it really does come down to, as Jamie was just pointing out, what our employees, regardless of age, we try to put people in buckets by age, and there are some characteristics, but what are our employees looking for overall? And the pandemic really did force so many of those things that Jamie just said. And it's kind of a wake-up call for not just higher education, but for employers in general. But, in higher education, what does it mean for, for example, a student life professional that we're asking to manage a residence hall and be available 24/7, the entire semester without some acknowledgement that there is a different way that work could potentially be configured, or for our IT professionals that could just as easily perform, 100% of their duties from the other side of the country, being forced to be in a seat, in a cubicle, in the IT building on the campus. That's no longer the true way that we engage our employees. So I use those two examples because they're very different type examples, but very relevant to our experiences on campus right now.
That's right. Time on task. It was the way we held people accountable in the past, and now it's complex, right? We have TJ Logan, one of our earlier podcast guests and thought leader in higher ed. He talks about moving from rules-based to results-based leadership, right? So the rules are 8 to 5 and you need to be in the seat, versus results. We need these 5 rooms cleaned by this time. How you get them done, that's on your choice. So how do we move in that direction? So Jamie, is there anything you all are implementing or moving, encouraging leaders, enabling leaders to do to meet some of these needs in your system?
Sure. So we definitely have created flexible work arrangement policies and encouraging units to look at their own individual situations, what their needs are, and to be as open-minded, innovative, creative, and flexible as they can. So really putting that decision-making at the unit level, while we set some guidelines and boundaries at the system level and the campus level, really wanting those units to take responsibility and accountability for determining what is best for their organization and their employees. Not every employee wants that kind of flexibility. Some want to come in every single day, but providing that kind of autonomy and flexibility to have the employees have some input into it so they don't feel like they're being told what to do, but they actually have a part of that decision making has really changed. I think the whole mentality of work arrangements, hours, schedules, like you said, not an 8 to 5, but when is it easiest for you to get your work done? Some people I have, kid activities after school, but I can certainly get up a lot earlier and I'd love to work early and finish a little bit earlier. Well, does that work for the type of job that they're doing? If it does, why not try that? Because we're finding that the same amount of work is getting done. Deadlines are being met, projects are being completed. And if the employee feels like they have actual say in how they do that, they're going to be a lot more satisfied, like we talked about earlier. So we're definitely have implemented our flexible work arrangement policies to encourage that for all of our units.
Interesting point. And what I'm wondering is, are you maybe suggesting that it's there's a policy which allows for individuality in the way Andy was talking about. And I'm hearkening back to what I recall from some previous roles where it feels a little bit like sometimes we had policies that were really to control any deviation from a norm of being. And what I feel like you might be saying, and tell me, please correct me if I'm not hearing you correctly, is maybe now we're creating a policy which encourages individuality, probably still with some, boundaries on that, of course, but allows for this individuality in a way that Andy's talking about. Is that a new thing on campuses? And is that doable at really big places?
Yes, absolutely. It is more, yes, we have boundaries, we have guidelines, we have kind of parameters around it, but really taking the notion that it's not a one size fits all. So we no longer can say, okay, we have one policy, everyone at our universities, we have, over 25,000 full-time employees in the University of Illinois system, plus another 25,000 temporary and part-time. It is not going to work for every single department and individual to follow the same schedule, same type of work structure. So we recognize now that we need to be flexible and look at individual units differently, even though it might be on the same campus. We have 3 campuses, one in Chicago, very urban, one in Urbana-Champaign, which is very rural, and then one in Springfield, which is our capital. All 3 have very different cultures. So our recruiting is different. Our retention strategies can be different, and looking at their work schedules are very different. In Chicago, some people are taking the train into campus that may take them 2 hours and then 2 hours coming home. They've wasted 4 hours on a train when they could have actually been way more productive at home. That's very different in Urbana-Champaign, where people live about 10 minutes from campus and drive in. So you really have to look at, your individual locations, your employee population, what their needs are, and be flexible and nimble enough to not say, okay, we're having one policy, everybody's following the same one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think the key word, and we've said it several times throughout, is flexibility. And flexibility does not always mean that you create a specific policy that says, Kelsey will be here from 7 to 2 and then from 3 to 6 or whatever. But incorporating even just small amounts of flexibility make a huge difference in our ability to attract and retain key talent. So often we get caught up in thinking that we have to have a set policy that regiments the flexibility. And it's just kind of really important for us to think about this in what true flexibility means and asking the employee, what that means for him or her, for them.
As HR professionals, how difficult has this been for you all to lead these conversations, these transitions? I mean, I'm making an assumption it's been difficult. Maybe you're like, hey, it's easy, go with the flow kind of people. You're both shaking your heads.
No, it has not been easy. I can say no. You have so many different managers and leaders and their different mentalities about leading, and some who feel I have to see you. I have to see your face. I have to see you in your office to trust that you're doing your job. So it really has required a lot of change of trusting in your staff, because you're not going to see them. If they're working remotely, you don't see when they're logging in, you don't see what they're doing. And you just have to build that kind of trust and relationship with your employees, that they know that you trust that they're going to get their work done. And if they don't, and they can't be productive at home, you address that. But it's been really hard, I think, because we have so many different leaders with different thoughts on this, different generation of thought in terms of, is it okay to not see them in their seats, in their offices every day?
I think another thing to build upon that is that think about all the transitions in our workforce since March 2020, the onset of the pandemic, and the impact overall, but through the lens that Jamie and I use every day, the impact on our HR leaders who were creating policies on the fly, where all of a sudden the entire workforce was remote and some employees not available to work, to how that transitioned over time in different ways. I'm sure Jamie's 3 campuses, it was different on all 3 of those campuses and the system office. And then we kind of transitioned out of the pandemic into these new expectations in terms of work, which is not a bad thing, but it's like In some ways, it's almost like the hits just kind of keep on coming, in terms of the challenges for the workforce. And now you add, and this was one of the things that was emphasized in the retention survey too, is recruitment and retention challenges on top of all of those things, and a workforce that is continuing to change and evolve. There will continue to be significant challenges, not just for HR in higher education, but for anyone who has workforce needs.
Well, and I'll add to the recruitment piece that Andy mentioned is that while we would have expected that our recruitment would become so much easier, right? Now we have remote positions and we'll let somebody live in another state and work for us. So it has broadened our net, much wider that we can recruit from, which is partially true, but it also broadened that net for everybody else. So not just us. So now we are competing with everyone else who will also allow them to work remotely. And what we're finding is that while that does help some, we cannot pay what your cost of living is where you live. So if you choose you want to live in California and our job happens to be a fully remote position, that's great. We'll let you live there. However, we can't pay you what salaries are in California. We can pay you what our salary is here on our campus in our geographic location. So that sometimes is a challenge for us to find the best talent if they don't want to move. But we can't pay them what they need to make to live where they've chosen to live.
And then you probably have a leader coming to you saying, but I really want this person, so can't we make an exception? And then we want to pay them more. And then please exception for me. And then, right, exactly. So we would be remiss, and I know we don't want to just talk about salaries or compensation, but I think for our listeners and for Loren and I, just the complexity of compensation in large, complex organizations. Like, when do you know when to be flexible? How do you know when to say this is the range and this is the range? And when do you move the range? And can you give the listeners a little bit of what goes into all that and how you're thinking?
And what do we mean by compensation even? I mean, what is compensation? How is it calculated? And why is, when is the appropriate time for somebody to inquire with HR about that?
It's important to think first and foremost, going back to one of the things I shared at the beginning, employer of choice. An employer of choice pays a fair wage and doesn't try to get away with, some preconceived notion that, we're higher education and we always pay lower than everyone else. That needs to be thrown out the window. That is no longer applicable in this 2024 environment. So first and foremost, what is a fair wage? It doesn't mean that we're pushing the top of the market, because I don't think most of our employees would expect for us to be pushing the top of the market. But it does mean when they look at similar jobs, depending upon the job, either across the country or in their local or regional area, that they see that we are doing our best to pay a competitive wage for the particular job. So that's first and foremost. And then I think beyond that, as we think about total compensation, and this is something that at CUPA-HR and my other employers we've been really diligent about sharing with our employees the total perspective of their compensation. So how much the institution pays for their health insurance, or contributes to health insurance and dental and life insurance and paid leave opportunities and the flexibility that comes with the college environment. All of those things are a part of the compensation, but we often don't do a good enough job of sharing that full perspective with our employees. So I would say that, and then Jami, I'll defer to you on some of this. I'm sure there are some very different perspectives for some of the positions on your Chicago campus versus your Springfield campus versus your Urbana-Champaign campus.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like I mentioned, we have 3 different campuses in very different geographic areas with different cultures and cost of living. In our Chicago campus, we're competing with Fortune 500 companies that can pay, in some cases much better than we can. So we really have to sell the candidates on, look at your entire benefit package. Look at all the leave time you get. Higher education is usually very generous in amount of holiday and leave time we get, vacation and sick leave, that you may not get in corporate America. And so what are the things that we are doing that are better than our corporate peers that we can sell if our compensation can't be quite as high. We have a civil service system in our state. And so we've got different pay structures for our civil service employees versus our academic employees. So that can also create lots of complexities around having a very structured set of employee pay scales and then a very unstructured that we are trying to really get our arms around. How do we have some kind of uniformity across our campus so we're not even competing internally, which happens quite often, that if you have one college that is quite rich in their funding and one that is much smaller that doesn't have as large a budget, there's a lot of internal competition as well for candidates. And they can go to a different college within our university and make more doing similar work. And so we're really trying to handle that kind of a situation as well, not only our external peers that we are competing with as well. And, at our Springfield campus, it's our capital of Illinois, and we are competing with all the state agencies. And they typically actually do have larger pay scales than we have at our small university in our Springfield campus. So every one of our campuses, we have our own challenges in different ways. And we're really trying to look at the total package, like Andy mentioned, and have been actually looking at different benefits we don't offer that we can start adding to our portfolio. We increased our parental leave recently from 2 to 6 weeks of paid time. And that's, something very attractive as we have a lot of new generations coming into the workforce who will be using that time. And so they look at those things because they are looking at what kind of time are you giving me off? If I have a child or if I adopt a child or have an illness, what are you going to give me that somebody else isn't going to?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How are you going to care for me?
Yeah. How are you going to care for me? And the point that Jami just made about parental leave, and this is one of the things that we've been talking about across the country, is things like paid parental leave, meaningful paid parental leave beyond the regular leave accruals are differentiators. And when we are trying to characterize ourselves as employers of choice, what does that mean in terms of those differentiators, whether it be benefits or other parts of the environment overall? And I think that is one of the things that we're hearing a lot, is that meaningful paid parental leave should be a part of the benefits that we offer for higher education to continue to emphasize that we are employers of choice.
We're closing in a little bit on the end of our time, but I want to go back to something a place you started, Andy, with some incremental things that people can do to make a difference. And I'm wondering, we've talked about some of the bigger things that are policies and some of the major obligations leaders have, but I wonder, are there things that listeners can do that are incremental things that make a positive difference in employee satisfaction that come to your mind, Andy, and then Jami, and maybe each of you have a few ideas we can leave our listeners with?
Yes, thank you for that, Loren, because there are simple things. Some are complex, obviously, but there are simple things that we as leaders can do every single day or on a regular basis that make a huge difference. One of the questions that we asked in the survey was about retention incentives. So beyond pay, beyond the flexible work environment, what are the other things? And some of the things that employees identified as differentiators for them are things like regular verbal recognition of doing good work.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Regular verbal recognition of doing good work.
Yeah.
That does not take a lot of time and effort, but it's intentionality. And that is a part of the normal course of work for us as leaders and managers, and not an extra thing, but something that our employees see, a genuine commitment to us to recognize the work. The other thing that we also saw as it relates to incentives is that higher education overall does a very poor job of professional development and career advancement. So, and that doesn't mean that we all need to have these, beautiful job families and job trees and things like that. But what is it that we are doing on a regular basis to help our employees develop their skills, develop their competencies, do things they enjoy, but also looking at building their career at our particular organization? So those kind of things, in addition to the things that we might normally think of, are really key and don't take a lot of time and effort. And professional development does not always have to cost money. Sometimes we get hung up on that too. So there are elements of professional development that do not have to cost money or a lot of money. And that's something that we should also consider. So Jami, what would you add to what I just shared?
Yeah, and actually to add to the professional development piece, it doesn't cost money. We actually created a new program at the University of Illinois a few years ago called Know Your You. And it gives each employee up to 8 hours per academic year to go spend time on the campus, go see a lecture, go visit a research lab, go take a tour, to get people excited again about working for your university. Because we find that we all work like in our little bubble, right? In our department, we don't necessarily get outside our own little area. And people are forgetting all the great work that our universities are doing and creating all these innovations and the things that we're doing for the world. And it really gets people excited and proud to work for the University of Illinois when they see what's really going on outside their office. And so we encourage people to use those hours. It's free. You go, you take it. If you want to take 2 at a time, if you want to take 4 hours, however you want to use it. And it's getting people out to see, oh my gosh, I had no idea that, we created this, product. And people are then feeling pride in working for the university. And I think that's really important. If you feel a sense of, I'm really proud to work here. I want to tell people I work here. I love to go like on a vacation and strike up a conversation. And then you find out, oh, they're an alum of the U of I, or their family's an alum. And you just feel really good about that. I think that really helps as well with retaining our current employees and reminding them why they work in higher education and the mission that we have.
So one last question. The two of you have been with your respective organizations. Andy, you mentioned 2 decades. Jami, I recall you're probably pretty similar.
Yes.
So what keeps you in your roles? What keeps you there? What makes you your choice to stay?
So yes, I just I'm at my 23 years at the university. And for me, like I mentioned, it's really just that pride. It's the leadership, I think, that sets the tone and the culture, and that I really feel like I'm valued, that I feel like they care about me, that they listen to me, that they find that I can provide value and contributions and give me that autonomy to do that and the resources to do that for myself, my staff, my department. And, just really looking at the community that we have within higher education at our universities, and it's a community like no other. It's higher ed is so large and broad, yet it's a very small world, and we get to know each other at all of our institutions, and we just have each other's back, right? We collaborate, we share resources and ideas and tools because we genuinely care about what our institutions are doing, whether we're public, whether we're private, whether we're small or large. And I just feel like my institution genuinely cares about me, the environment, the staff, and I don't think I would find that genuine caring about how our well-being, what we can give back to the institution elsewhere. So that's why I stay.
What a great response, Jami. Thank you for sharing that. For me, everything that Jami just said, I'll echo that, but it really does come down to, for me, that the work that I get to be a part of matters. And it matters because we are hopefully positively impacting people every single day. So our work matters, people matter more. And that ability, that opportunity to work and see the impact that it has across the country is really very fulfilling personally and professionally. And I can look back on the almost 2 decades at CUPA-HR, and throughout that period of time, there have been more than I could ever count opportunities for me to be a part of something much bigger than I could ever be by myself. And it's such a joy and such an opportunity and such an honor to work with colleagues like Jami and others across the country, and also the national office staff that truly care about the work we do and also care about each other. And, at the end of the day, when we're spending time doing this work, the ability and the opportunity to do it with people who care about what they're doing and are passionate about what they're doing, but also care about each other, really is such an important part of this life journey for all of us.
Well, that is a great ending to a really informative episode. I want you to know I've been listening, and I want you to know you've done very good work here today. Recognition for good work. Thank you. You're helping us learn so much. You've reminded us really that policy can also be individual and flexible, and how important that is to employee satisfaction and wellness to achieve retention. And I was thinking to myself, what great, you're talking about storytelling earlier, Jamie, the story of higher ed. You're such great storytellers and ambassadors for all the good things going on in higher education, and the people that are just doing such amazing work that are too often and so often not talked about, seen, heard, known about in the public. So thanks for what you're doing to make those stories be visible, and for what you're doing for all of us that are trying to serve higher education as well. So thanks so much. Really appreciate what you do.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Great to see both of you and to be a part of the podcast.
Hey, Loren, it's time for your favorite segment, Extra Credit. And we've been talking in the last couple episodes about South by Southwest EDU. And when this episode airs, we will be in Austin, Texas.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
Making magic happen. So when you think about South by Southwest EDU, showing up at something for the first time, what are you most excited about? What's the first thing you want to do when you get there? What's on your mind?
Well, gosh. When I think of South by Southwest, the first thing that comes to mind for me, honestly, is music. That's how I remember and know South by Southwest, even though it is so much more than that today. People may not know that it's a film festival, it's a tech festival, it's an education innovation conference, and then, of course, music. So for me, I think of music and cool people. I just want to hang around music and cool people. That's kind of that's what I'm thinking. What about you?
So hopefully our session has music and cool people. I mean,
cool.
We better make sure we have for sure. So those of you listening that happen to be in Austin with us, we can't wait to see you on Wednesday. For me, I'm a little nervous because it's rare to go to an association or an event or a space that I haven't had any connectivity to, and it's been a dream to show up and be a thought leader in the space, and we're actually doing it. And so I'm hopeful, I'm nervous, excited.
Well,
all the pieces.
I think that's even a little, that's normal because first of all, this sounds like a humble brag a little bit, but there were 1,600 submissions and 200 acceptances, and we're one of those 200, which I'm excited about. But that means there's a little bit of a standard for doing something interesting there. So I get that. Maybe because I don't know what to expect, I'm not so much nervous as really excited about trying to do something novel, trying to be different for people there. So it's going to be fun.
Well, what is it? We got to keep Austin weird. You have to contribute to that.
Yeah.
I think that's
keep
right.
Austin, it's a bumper sticker.
All right. Well, we'll keep you all posted on how it all goes.
Bye.
Campus Confidential is presented by Compass Group, produced by Corey Inscoe, with your hosts Kelsey Harmon Finn and Loren Rullman.